Impressive, is it not? Fit for a leader, meant to show influence and the burden of it. It is where the Inquisition will sit in judgment. Where you will sit in judgment.
Who will I be judging, exactly?
Those who have done wrong. You will know of them, at the very least. All this presumes they have survived their initial encounter with you, of course.
Will we be taking heads right here in the hall?
Goodness, no! If such an option is available, it will be done elsewhere. And it may not be necessary. The Inquisition's sovereignty is derived from the allies who validate it. You are both empowered and bound. Justice has many tools. If their application is clever, execution may even seem merciful by comparison.
Is there anyone I should judge?
Take the throne when you're ready. We will bring him before you.
Knight Captain Denham, Inquisitor. He awaits judgment for serving the Lord Seeker at Therenfall Redoubt. I knew some of the knights who died there. I asked to oversee his sentencing. The Envy Demon perhaps fooled the Knight Captain, but following his superior's orders nearly destroyed the Templars.
I hope the Knight Captain is lucid enough to understand what he's done.
I only did as I was told.
Knowingly or not, you condemned your brothers and sisters to death.
You would have done the same if you hadn't abandoned the Order. I served faithfully. It went red after what the Lord Seeker told me to do.
I didn't suffer at your hands. That was your knights in the Templar Order. Let the remaining Templars judge the man who failed them.
The penalty will be death. They can't. Not after what I've seen.
Yes?
I wanted to ask you about the Circle of Magi.
Of course. What do you wish to know?
You must have an opinion of the Templars after living so long in this circle.
Having opinions about Templars, my dear, is exactly like having opinions about mages or Navarrans or men. I have known some who were impossible to endure and some who were utterly charming. I have suffered insults at the hands of those in the armor, but no more than I endured from nobles or tradesmen in Val Royal. Personally, I have found the Templars a useful tool, skilled at keeping more unpleasant elements at bay.
What was it like to live in a circle?
My dear, your question is the root of all problems with mages. I cannot tell you. Every circle was different. Their Templars were different, their politics unique. And every person within each tower had an experience of circle life unique to themselves. Some people suffered and some were content. Some were cruel, some compassionate, and some indifferent. The same is true of people everywhere, in all circumstances, whether they are mages or not.
So, tell me about your personal experience with the circle.
I enjoyed life in the Montsimard Circle, my dear. It was an edifice devoted to knowledge and refinement. And mages need the company of other mages. No one else can truly understand the challenges we face, nor see the world as we do.
You must have been under constant supervision being forced by Templars to live in the tower. Was that hard to endure?
My dear, I have a suite in the palace and a wing at my dear Duke Bastien's estate. I've never been forced to live anywhere. Most circles allowed mages to live away from the tower, either on their own or in service to the nobility. All that was required was permission from the first enchanter. Some circles were harsher in their restrictions. Kirkwall was the worst, but it was the exception. Most were quite permissive, perhaps too permissive in retrospect.
How did we come to this state where the Circle's in revolt?
A failure of perspective that infected Circle leadership. Mages lived solely in a world of Templars and mages. They could not even imagine what was beyond the tower walls. Kirkwall gave the world a reason to remember its fear of magic. A mage killed hundreds with a snap of their fingers. Across Thedas, a new tangible fear of magic grew. Commoners and nobles alike called out to the Chantry for protection. But the malcontents in the towers thought nothing of this. They cared only for themselves and for their anger at the new Templar restrictions. When a mage attempted to assassinate Divine Justinia, again, the mages protested the investigation. The leadership chose to vote on independence based on the intolerable conditions imposed by the Templars, sparing no thought to the fact that magic was more feared in the aftermath of these attacks than it had been since Tevinter's day. So long as they had their freedom, they could care little for riots, angry mobs, or about pitting mages against each other.
Did they have cause to rebel?
In the aftermath of their terrorist attacks? Was that really the most opportune time to break away? By all means protest abuses by the Templars. Just don't do it in a way that says mages support wholesale murder. By voting when they did, my colleagues all but declared war upon the ordinary people of Thedas. A war in which we are outnumbered 100 to 1.
I thought the fighting was only between mages and Templars. Why are mages fighting mages?
The vote for independence was carried by only a small margin, but Fiona chose to let the motion stand. Those who opposed a rash declaration of war against the entire free world had little choice. By breaking from the Chantry when they did, the rebels declared themselves in support of mass murder. Anyone who did not wish to support terrorism and the slaughter of innocents was forced to take arms against the rebels.
Are you familiar with Grand Enchanter Fiona?
We've met. Before her horrendously ill-timed and selfish vote for independence, I thought her adequate at her job. In her dotage, she could not handle looking after the well-being of so many people. We would have done better to replace her years ago, to let her spend time gardening.
Inquisitor,
What is your evaluation of how we're doing?
adequate. Based on a partial improvements to Skyhold.
As you were.
Yes, Inquisitor.
One day I'm going to read all these books. One day, when I have time.
Did you know we're actually related, Inquisitor?
Related?
Oh, not first cousins or anything like that. Can you imagine? You're a Trevelyan, however, and somewhere in dank nethers of my family tree, there was also a Trevelyan. Perhaps he was even the one who ventured to Ostwick to establish the branch. We are talking long ago, of course.
You know that off the top of your head?
Not the top. Maybe the lower middle or thereabouts. Bloodlines are serious business in Tevinter. You're taught lessons and tested by strict nannies. I heard your family mentioned, and I had to go through all the old mnemonics, but yes, there it is. I knew there was a reason we looked so much alike.
Yay?
Indeed, yay!
Oh,
Pish. You go back far enough. 90% of Thedas has Tevinter blood. No need to panic, Inquisitor.
It occurs to me that I barely know anything about you.
Beyond my being a mage from Tevinter, you mean?
Beyond that, yes.
And beyond my being so charming and well-dressed, which is obvious to anyone.
Let's move on, shall we?
I am the scion of House Parvis, a product of generations of careful breeding and the repository of its hopes and dreams. Naturally, I despised it all. The lies, the scheming, the illusions of supremacy. That's Tevinter in a nutshell, isn't it? Needless to say, my family was not happy with my choices.
Why would your family be upset with your choices?
Because I rejected their idyllic plan. If they had their way, by now I'd be married to some unlucky girl from a powerful family. We'd live in luxurious despair, despising each other as I waited to take my father's place in the magisterium. I declined the honor, and thus it's best I'm far from home. Less of an embarrassment that way, you see.
What did you mean by generations of careful breeding?
The great family families of Tevinter don't have children. They refine traits, weed out the undesirable, and promote the rest. My mother was chosen for my father because magic runs strongly in her blood. Never mind that they loathed each other. They wanted a son who could become Archon to make House Parvis the envy of the Imperium. They got me. A cautionary tale that you should be careful what you wish for.
I'm getting the impression you don't care much for your homeland.
On the contrary, I care for my homeland a great deal. There's so much potential. Sadly, we squander it. We refuse to acknowledge how far we've fallen because pretending is easier. We pretend the Qunari can be beaten. We pretend that we're superior to everyone, even our own people. Not everyone feels that way. I don't. Sadly, we're the minority.
It just seems so much of what you say about the Imperium is entirely negative.
It might sound that way. For all our faults, my people have many virtues. We are laden with history and culture. Tevinter is where Thedas truly began, remember? We treasure our past and preserve it. You can walk down a side street and find nothing built during the modern ages. And despite appearances, we care. Deeply. About everything. We have no reserve, not in war and not in love. If I truly believed my homeland was beyond all hope, I wouldn't miss it so much.
Why remain with the Inquisition? Why not go back to Tevinter?
I'm not exactly welcome back home. Not that it matters, I'm quite accustomed to being a pariah. It adds to my charm. I can do more for Tevinter here. If the Venatori succeed, it'll set my homeland back 1,000 years. I'm sure some Magisters would disagree, but that's why we kill them.
I think I've heard enough.
That's too bad. I never tire of talking about myself.
I'd like to ask you about Tevinter.
Ah, yes. Everyone outside the Imperium always seems quite fascinated by it. Probably why they come up with so many ridiculous tales. Flying cows over Minrathous. That's madness. All right, that one's actually true, but the cows didn't have wings. I digress. Anything in particular you wanted to know?
There's an Imperial Chantry, isn't there? With its own divine?
You people aren't supposed to talk about the Black Divine, are you? If you mention him outside the Imperium, people make that face. Like you're urinating in public. But yes, we do have the Chantry, or a version of it. Night and day comparing it to yours.
Is the Imperial Chantry so different from ours?
Not in theory. The main difference is in the whole magic is meant to serve man, not rule over him business. Back home, ruling the unwashed masses is serving them, for the good of the Imperium. Perhaps it started with good intentions, but these days it's academic. The circles are in command.
There are circles of magi in the Imperium?
We don't have dismal little mage prisons, if that's what you mean. They're academies, prestigious ones. We have Templars as well, but they don't cancel spells or whatever your Templars do. They're soldiers. They watch for abuse of magic, yes, but only those who are weak or who fall out of favor get dealt with. Mostly they enforced the Magisterium's edicts. The Chantry smiles and nods from the sidelines.
Do you consider yourself Andrastian?
The big question. It might surprise you that I do consider myself Andrastian. I simply do not believe in the Chantry. It is a relic, whether back home or here in the south. Something from a bygone age desperately clinging to relevance. It's not an opinion that makes me popular.
I'm not surprised. It's not an opinion you should share.
You did ask, if you'll recall. I'll say this. I may not believe in the Chantry, but I believe in you.
In me?
That the Maker sent you, whether through Andraste or fate. Cassandra is not wrong. You are what we needed most at the moment we needed it. That's what they will say in ages to come.
That's what you think? That's ridiculous.
Oh, I'm glad you're so certain. Me? I've seen too much to believe I know everything. The world is bigger than I. Even bigger than you. It laughs at all the things we think we know. The Maker doesn't need me to believe. But I do. The thought of no one at all watching out for us is too frightening.
Do you really call him the Black Divine?
We don't call him that, oh no. In the Imperium, he's the true Divine. The woman sitting on the Sunburst throne is some backwater pretender. It all stems from a disagreement over Andraste. Marvelous, isn't it?
Why would they disagree over Andraste?
It's not my field of expertise, but the Imperium believes Andraste was a mortal woman, a mage. Down south, they say, no, she's the bride of the Maker, ascended to his side, divine provenance, a blah blah blah. We feel better believing Andraste was one of us. Makes executing her less damning, you see. So we elected a man as divine, the South declared war, and we've been feuding cousins ever since.
So the Imperial Divine is always a man?
All the better to distinguish him from that other one, yes. Don't think there aren't a number of female magisters who bristle at that. Why can't they be divine after all? Same reason you never see a man on the Sunburst throne. Because that's how it's always been done. Excellent reasoning.
Let me ask you something else.
So many questions.
It seems strange that an entire empire would be ruled by mages.
I find it strange that your mages don't rule anything at all. Actually, the fiction in the Imperium is that mages don't rule. The Magisterium rules. That magisters are all mages is considered a convenient technicality.
What is the Magisterium, exactly?
The upper house of the Imperial Senate, and the only part worth having a seat on. Those seats are split among the circles of Magi, the Chantry, and the major families. All majors now. It's odd that outside the Imperium, you use Magister like it applies to every Tevinter mage.
If you're not a Magister, then what are you called? No special title?
I'm an Altus, which is almost as good as a Magister, depending on who you ask.
I've never heard of an Altus.
Upper class. Those families who trace descent from the Dreamers, the first prophets of the old gods. If you're a mage and you're not Altus, then you're later. Lower class. If you're not a mage at all, you're Soperati. That's everyone else. We do love our fancy words.
I thought the Archon ruled over the Imperium.
Well, yes. Technically, he can overrule laws passed by the Magisterium, but that never happens. Even so, he gets to appoint new Magisters, which means all the families vie madly for his favor. Thus, the Archon gets invited to all the parties. The truest path to Tevinter influence, let me tell you.
If it's a fiction, that means mages do rule, then.
Yes and no. Let me put it this way. Mages do rule, but not all mages are equal. If you're not from the right family, chances are you don't rule anything. Maybe you're even a slave. The idea that anyone could be a mage, however, keeps the masses placated.
Can anyone be a mage?
Technically, the potential runs mostly in bloodlines, but it's been known to happen. More importantly, commoners believe it can. Tevinter legend is chock full of mage heroes from humble origins. So they hold out hope. Someday my son or my son's son will be a mage. Someday. Poor sods don't realize that means he'll be a quaestor at the arse end of the 100 Pillars, at best.
Being a quaestor isn't a good thing?
I imagine the average non-mage likes to think so. Counting numbers and shuffling papers all day is better than many occupations after all. If you're a second-class citizen among a pack of piranha, however, your outlook changes.
But let me ask you something else.
Of course.
Anyone who talks about the Imperium mentions slavery. It's the center of the slave trade.
Ah. That is true.
And did you have slaves?
Not personally, but my family does and treats them well. Honestly, I never thought much about it until I came south. Back home, it's how it is. Slaves are everywhere. You don't question it. I'm not even certain many slaves do.
You think slaves like it that way? Don't be ridiculous.
I didn't say they like it. It's all most of them know. In the south, you have alienages, slums, both human and elven. The desperate have no way out. Back home, a poor man can sell himself. As a slave, he could have a position of respect, comfort, and could even support a family. Some slaves are treated poorly, it's true. But do you honestly think inescapable poverty is better?
At least they're free. They don't have slavery forced on them.
You think people choose to be poor and oppressed? I doubt it. I don't know what it's like to be a slave, true. I never thought about it until I saw how different it was here. But I suspect you don't know either. Nor should you believe that every tale of Tevinter excess is the norm.
Just how often is blood magic used there?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
That's what any Magister would tell you. They'd be convincingly offended by the notion, too. Of course, what people call blood magic here, and what we consider blood magic, are two different things.
What's considered actual blood magic in Tevinter?
Blood magic isn't inherently dangerous. Using your own blood or that of a willing participant, what's the harm? The problem is that what's permitted only gets you so much power. And what if you need more? You always need more. That's where we get into sacrifices and demon summoning. None of that is done. Not officially. Behind closed doors, it's a different story. Real blood magic can give you an edge. A leg up against your opponents. It's safe to assume that any mage of rank does it. The rest are quietly shut out of power, to put it bluntly.
You'd think the Templars would object.
I imagine they did, long ago. Once, their investigations might have been sincere. Then their balls were cut off. Too inconvenient. Nowadays, only the friendless are accused. And most of them probably innocent.
That's all I wanted to know.
Fair enough.
I'm curious why you were in Redcliffe in the first place.
Looking up an old mentor of mine. A magister by the name of Alexius. Good fellow. Always thought highly of him. Then one day, he asks me to join the Venatori. I don't know what he was thinking. He knew I wanted to change Tevinter, not regress it into prehistoric madness. The Venatori killed Alexius once he stopped being useful.
Seems odd he would get involved with the Venatori at all.
That's what I thought. I'd hoped to persuade him to leave Redcliffe. I suppose he had his reasons. People will do odd things when they're strung over a barrel. Either that, or I didn't really know Alexius at all.
I should go.
Naturally. Here we are again.
I'd like to ask you about Tevinter.
Popular topic. Anything specific?
Just how often is blood magic used there?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
That's what any Magister would tell you. They'd be convincingly offended by the notion, too. Of course, what people call blood magic here, and what we consider blood magic, are two different things.
What's considered actual blood magic in Tevinter?
Blood magic isn't inherently dangerous. Using your own blood or that of a willing participant, what's the harm? The problem is that what's permitted only gets you so much power. And what if you need more? You always need more. That's where we get into sacrifices and demon summoning. None of that is done. Not officially. Behind closed doors, it's a different story. Real blood magic can give you an edge, a leg up against your opponents. It's safe to assume that any mage of rank does it. The rest are quietly shut out of power, to put it bluntly.
You'd think the Templars would object.
I imagine they did, long ago. Once, their investigations might have been sincere. Then their balls were cut off. Too inconvenient. Nowadays, only the friendless are accused. Most of them probably innocent.
There must be some mages who oppose this.
Of course. I do. And I'm not entirely alone. Occasionally, there'll be a Magister who makes noise, and then the reform talk begins. All very patriotic. Meanwhile, that Magister will be quietly shunned. Chances are, surprise, it's learned he was a Maleficar all along. Most learn to keep quiet. Me? I enjoy the allure of pariahhood.
I'm wondering if the Imperium would be a useful ally.
I'd think you'd be more concerned whether or not they'd support the Venatori. They won't, of course. At least, not officially. They'll disavow all knowledge of dangerous cultists. Secretly, many Magisters will rejoice at the idea. And if the South falls to chaos in the meantime, all the better.
It would be in the Imperium's best interest to help. Surely it could use allies.
I think the Imperium gave up on the idea of allies a long time ago. We've been fighting the Qunari for what? 200 years off and on? It's a point of pride that we go it alone. They'll sneer at the South behind their silk handkerchiefs and say, "You've had it easy for far too long." Let's not forget that the Inquisition seems to be an arm of the Orlesian Chantry. Anathema so far as they're concerned.
We're not part of the Chantry. The Chantry opposed the Inquisition's formation.
You think that matters? Don't be silly. The Herald of Andraste. Your very title smacks of the Southern Chantry. You may as well be a heathen. I think they're far more frightened what you'll do if you succeed.
That's all I wanted to know.
Fair enough.
I should go.
Try not to kill anyone without me.
Our agents have encountered more followers of Corypheus, the so-called Venatori. Their leader, Calpurnia, has them searching elven ruins. For what, I do not know. I propose we stop the Venatori before they find what they seek.
Do you know anything about Calpurnia?
Only that Calpurnia is a name from ancient Tevinter legend. An unusual one. She was a priestess of Dumat, foster mother to the founder of the Imperium. A name like that is meant to assure the Venatori they follow in the footsteps of legends. We must prove them wrong.
What strategy do you have in mind?
A subtle approach. These Venatori have been shadowing a merchant called Vicinius on Calpurnia's orders. They've investigated his finances, surveyed his warehouses. I propose that you meet with Vicinius. Flatter him. Find out what he knows of Calpurnia.
Vicinius sounds like a Tevinter name.
Born in Tallow. Although he claims to be from Virantium, he sells rare oils and amber, and prefers red wine to white.
What side of the bed does he sleep on?
He's unremarkable. I cannot think why Calpurnia would care.
What if Vicinius is as much in the dark as we are?
It never hurts to eliminate an avenue of inquiry. And we should tread lightly with the Venatori. They have contacts and spies, just as we do. The sooner you speak with Vicinius, the better.
We should warn Vicinius that the Venatori cultists are sniffing around.
You'd earn his trust. I'll make arrangements for you to visit his summer home in Val Royeaux. Hopefully, your attention should be enough to pique his interest. We'll have Calpurnia's secrets yet.
Law has asserted itself.
Another
We'll
completed
see.
work of
Not much better than the road,
whatever
you
they
ask
used to
me.
call it.
If no one else will do it, someone has to step up.
We'll see.
And what else did Lady Forsythia say?
That she'd rather drown herself than help the Inquisition.
Anything else?
She said she'd have us flogged alive if we allied with her brother.
That does sound like her.
Cheer up, Josie. We at least have her attention.
You always do find the brighter side of things. We are in the midst of cementing an alliance with Lady Forsythia of Navarra, your worship. It's become a somewhat delicate task.
Should I post more guards outside your room?
That should be unnecessary, Inquisitor. I dissuaded her from sending soldiers when she learned we'd struck an accord with a brother she's feuding with. Lady Forsythia simply employs a colorful manner of speech.
Do you always apologize for bloodthirsty nobles?
It's the usual showmanship expected from those in power, Inquisitor. Nothing more. But I confess I do miss my staff from the embassy in Antiva. It was always useful to discuss the day's visitors with them.
I have time, if you'd like to review things with me.
I wouldn't wish to impose.
If it were imposing, I wouldn't have offered.
Well, I admit there are a few potential alliances it would be good to discuss. Right on the parlor floor, in front of everyone at the soiree. Who does such a thing in front of their guests?
The Duke of Kellington, apparently.
And then there's Cole's lurking. It frightens our guests half to death. Lord Gennard still won't respond to our letters. And Sarah, can she not find a single overshirt without mustard stains on it? Then there's Dorian. The man refuses to take anything seriously unless it suits its whim. Not to mention... Oh goodness. Have we been here an hour already?
It went by so quickly, I didn't even notice.
You're far too polite. I didn't intend to go on for so long. You must think me quite the gossip.
Spending time with such an engaging woman is never unpleasant, Lady Montilyet.
Goodness. I'm glad I haven't wasted your day. Well, I've taken up quite enough of your time already. Until next time, Your Worship. Inquisitor, is it true? Is the mark on your hand magic cast by Corypheus?
Corypheus claimed it's a spell gone wrong.
I wanted to think it was a blessing. A sign the Maker was returning to his creation. How credulous of me.
Perhaps the Maker set these events in motion so long ago, we can no longer see his hand in them.
It would be fitting if that were true. Does it hurt? The anchor, that is.
Not pain, it's more like my nerves go on fire.
It sounds most unpleasant.